I would like to introduce you to my guest today. Her name is Cherie Parnell. Cherie Parnell is a former barrister. She was called to the bar in 2001, and she's here to discuss her work as a former family barrister, but also to discuss the work that she's doing now with her charity. So, Cherie, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited about this opportunity to kind of talk about the past and talk about what I'm doing now.
Absolutely. And what I've noticed straight away is that you don't have a British accent. What's that about?
No, I sure don't. Although I don't talk like I did when I was growing up. I wasn't that Southern. Yeah, I've lived in the UK for over 34 years, but I was born in the States and I moved over here when I was still 18. My grandmother was English.
You practiced as a family barrister for many years. You were called to the bar in 2001. Tell us about the work that you did as a family barrister.
Well, predominantly when you start out, there'll be specialisms even within family law. But I did a mix of family law. So I did financial relief, sort of money splitting when couples divorce, divide up the assets, divide up the property, and all the angst that comes with that. Dealing with the division of the children. So often people would be fighting over where the children should live. Both parties would be wanting the sole care of the child with the other person to visit. Issues about non-molestation orders, so domestic violence, women, predominantly women, I would say, probably 98%, women seeking for effectively their partner or their husband to be ejected from the home or to not come within so many meters of the home, protecting them. Anything to do with like traveling outside of the jurisdiction. So for example, some parents might want to take the child out of the jurisdiction, out of the UK, and the other party says, no way. It could be something as specific as which school. The parents would be arguing about which school the child should go to or what holidays they could go on. Believe you me, people can argue about all sorts of things. Often the reality is that there's a lot going on underneath, and the issue itself becomes, really a small part of the hurt and anger and upset by both parties. So all sorts of anything to do with family issues, but also care proceedings. And that's public law. And that's where the state intervenes and seeks to remove children from the care of their parents or parents. And the state then seeking to either, if the local authority's application is for a care order, they can seek to get a care order and then a placement order, which then enables them to place the child permanently out of the care of the parent, and then an adoption order. So there's like a 3-stage process in which parents' complete legal rights are abolished and they are completely cut off. And someone else will take on the legal rights over their children. So I did a lot of that, particularly as you progress within your career. And that's obviously a really sad, you're dealing with some of the most underprivileged and often broken people trying to fight for their children. You didn't get a lot of middle-class people. It's very rare to have sort of professionals, was almost unheard of.
You said that most of the people involved in care proceedings tended to be, not middle class, tended to be working class families.
Well, I think also not even working class, people who are really living on the margins of society, not always, but because they themselves have been through care or they have drug problems. There are issues of domestic violence. I mean, that can happen in any sphere of life, within any sort of category in which you find yourself. I mean, I'm not a big one about class, but the reality is the people I was representing were often the poorest and definitely didn't have the voice. They would often get very, very angry. I would see particularly fathers or mothers, kicking off. They call it, oh, they're kicking off. But that's because what did they have? They didn't have influence. They didn't have money. And yes, they would get very angry. And the only way they felt that they could be, it was the thing that they had was to really tear into the social worker or anybody else who they felt weren't listening to them. So there's a lot of, it was very emotive work. I mean, all of it was very emotive. You have to have a pretty thick skin to work in family law. because you're dealing with, you got people who once absolutely loved each other so much, they married, they had children, and now they hate each other's guts and they want to destroy the other person. And they want everyone to know how bad that person is. And the airing of dirty laundry is really tough. They want justice. They want how they perceive the things that have happened to them. And it's really difficult because it's, you get different people's perspectives. And when relationships break down, often people don't behave very well because there's a lot of hurt.
Can I focus on the care proceedings? Because I am really fascinated about middle class parenting and what happens to middle class children who are abused or badly treated by their middle class parents. Do they not have to, do the local authority not get involved in those cases? Or is it that the middle class parents have more power, more money at their disposal and are able to, sidestep the local authority, as it were?
The reality is that they have greater support. They have greater networks. So they would be able to, so for example, if the local authority stepped in because they were aware that a father, particularly fathers, it was predominantly a father, might be downloading child pornography, they were caught doing that. And then they discovered that there was a lot of drinking going on. The father would be removed. The mother they'd be saying very clearly, him or the children. And because the mother often had a lot of more support, her own parents, his parents, the community, because they're much more embedded into the community, they have much better support, those children would not be removed. They were very firm and they could provide numerous options where the poorest don't. They don't have those options because often I used to represent some of these very young mothers and they'd come to court alone. And I used to think, my gosh, if I was in that scenario, the amount of people who would be coming to court to stand by me in my most painful and my most difficult, my children are being taken away. People would come from America, people would come from abroad to be with me, to support me. And there you would see a lone mother or father sitting there and going through proceedings, being cross-examined about the most awful things that had happened in their own lives, their own failures, the things and how they were failed. And I think that was really, really tough to kind of observe that.
And in 2015, you decided to leave the bar. Why?
Yeah. Well, it actually kind of go back probably 5 years prior to that. I had set up a kind of friendship, kind of support thing in a local hostel. I had been to church on the Sunday. I represented this mother, and she was a really nice girl. And she went into the witness box. She was a tough little cookie, and she would take 2 buses and a train to go and have contact. So you have contact in a observed setting. Somebody be sitting there with a notepad and writing down, your time with your child. And she was there. She'd bring little snacks. She was devoted to this child. She did not want this child to be adopted. And in the end, her background was very chaotic. She had been in care. She was hanging around with a lot of dysfunctional people and didn't have a safe place to live. She was kind of sofa surfing. And in the witness box, she said, they said, you don't trust us, you don't work with us. And she said, why should I trust you? I was abused in care. My own parents abused me. And you say I should trust you. And then they said to her, the people you're hanging out with, you don't have good support networks. They were criticizing. She said, where am I supposed to get these good friends? And it was that kind of listening to this young girl. I thought she hadn't had education. She'd left school young, had moved in all these various places. And there she was saying, like, how dare you? And in the end, they adopted that child. And it was as a result of that, I thought, yeah, where is this girl supposed to get these good friends? And where is the support for young people like that? And I knew down my road there was a hostel for young people. And I used to think, oh my God, I walk quickly. Little did I know how much I'd love these kids. I'd end up loving them. And I thought, they're hanging out the window, smoking weed, but then I thought about it. I went to church on the Sunday, and the minister said, stop saying, what is God's will for my life? Like, what do you see that you say, that's enough? Like, that's it. Go and make a difference there. That's God's spirit, like touching your heart. And I thought, yeah, that's it. That's enough. Like seeing these young people. And so I knocked on the door of the hostel, and this girl with like 2 teeth opened the door. She was like, "Yeah, what do you want?" I was like, "Oh my gosh, what am I doing here?" But and I went in and spoke with one of the workers there and said, "Could we hold a Christmas party?" And that's how it started. And that was 10 years ago. So I had known, we'd set that up, and we'd just taken a meal and love these kids, and we had no agenda, but to show kindness and to tell them, like, show them you're worthy of love, you're valuable, and you're important, and we're going to bring in this food, nice home cooked food, and we'll just play Uno, or we did various crafts, carved pumpkins with all these knives. Believe me, we had some adventures. And eventually we used to take them on holidays, and I could write a book. I could write a book about some of that.
That was in 2011 that you
Yeah,
began
so
your
I gotta move forward, don't I?
Yeah.
So I I'm keeping on earning a lot of money, making 6 figures. Life is good, very stressful, because by that time I was running also a mediation practice. I was a trustee of a charity. Oh my gosh, what did I think I could do all that? I don't know, because actually it was probably a saving grace that I did leave the bar. I didn't think so, but I was ridiculously busy. But I kept feeling this pull. I'd represent these mothers, shake their hands at the end of proceedings, and then say, they're losing their children. They'd have maybe 3 more visits with their baby, and then they would go for a goodbye contact. I mean, it's barbaric. They'd have to tranquilize me to go and spend an hour and a half, pictures with my child, and then knowing this baby is going to be, I will never see this child again unless they come looking for me when they're 18. And that got to a point, I used to look, I remember Googling online thinking there must be something for these women I could refer them to. And I Googled, I thought, oh, wow, I found something. But it was actually a support group. It says, I put care proceedings or adoption support group, mothers care proceedings. But it was actually a support group for adoptive mothers, the mothers who actually have the children, because often many children who are adopted will have all sorts of attachment issues. And that is important for sure. But there was nothing, absolutely nothing. And
so can I just want
somebody
to
needs to do something about this.
Well, no, I just want to clarify because I find it extraordinary. So the court would make an adoption order, and following the adoption order, the parent would have one contact visit before the actual formal adoption with their child.
Well, what it is care proceedings start first. There's care order and placement order, 2 options that the local authority will seek. And it's in that, once those orders are made, the child is then the local authorities share what's called parental responsibility. I'm probably teaching you family law here, where they share the rights to make decisions about the child. But in reality, the parents, they will have a few more visits and they will never see the child again. But I mean, I had cases they can make an interim care order and seek to remove the child before a final decision is made. The baby will be born in hospital. The local authority will come to the hospital the day after, sometimes on the day the mother has given birth in the early hours of the morning, and they will get a care order. I used to have mothers sitting next to me, and they gave birth that day or the day before, and they have given the trauma of, and they're pleading for their child not to be removed into local authority care. But more often than not, the local authority had their care plan that removal was important, for that child was at risk. But often,
in what circumstances would the local authority obtain a care?
There would be issues about, because they'll say that the mother or the father, both the mother and the father, are living very chaotic lives, that they haven't cooperated with the local authority, that the assessment said they're supposed to do something called the public law outline, where they're supposed to pre-birth assessment prior to the birth. But often they might have learning difficulties. We've had mums at Beam, which we'll talk about later, who have learning difficulties, lovely, lovely, very gentle, kind women. But they'll say, oh, they're not competent, they're not capable of meeting the needs of the child. They themselves have had poor parenting. So the child is at risk of suffering emotional neglect, physical harm, that type of thing. But it's not where, if you had a case where children were being sexually abused or physically abused with a child, that's really straightforward, isn't it? Because the child has got bruises, they're terrible things. The difficulty with neglect cases, there's a wide span. in which cases will fall. And 109 children are removed from parents in the UK every day. I mean, every day. That statistic was 4 years ago, and it's since the pandemic, it has risen dramatically. So, I mean, some of those children, of course, will return to their parents' care. We're not having 109 children adopted every day, but we're talking about a very serious problem where, because particularly where you're poor, where you have not got, as I say, strong support networks, strong community, particularly where people are kind of living below the radar, it's very easy to take their children away. I know it sounds hard to believe, but I used to do this work, and of course, what I'm doing now.
It's such a drastic thing to do, to extract a child from their parent because of neglect. And quite often, as you've explained, the neglect is down to lack of education, lack of role models, just not knowing how to be a parent. Surely those are things that can be taught. Why are we not investing money in those sorts of programs?
The difficulty for social workers, and there are a number of really good social workers, I don't deny that. We are not, being the charity I said, we're not an I hate social services club. I mean, there are social workers who definitely have let down and 100% have twisted things. We know, because I hear this from the mothers. But there are some great social workers. The difficulty is their caseload is off the charts, as you can imagine. And many of the mothers and many of the young people down at the hostel will tell me they had 8 different moves. They had 10 different social workers or 5 different social workers. How, in any event, many of these parents do not trust authority. They do not trust anything social services, like slam the door, close it, or bolt it. And they're coming in, they're checking your bed, is there food in the cupboard? They have this power to come into your home. I mean, you can close the door, but when you do, be sure you're going to find yourself in court. And it's this lack of trust, this lack of building relationship. And it's often not the social worker's fault. They are trying to juggle so many different cases. And there are some charities working. Sure Start is a national charity that works with struggling families. There's Safe Families, which is around particularly in the West, in London, who work with families that are struggling. But the difficulty is, clearly, if 109 children are being removed every day, then this is a situation that just, number one, it's not sustainable. We can't keep removing this level. I mean, 2 women a week are killed through domestic violence, and that's tragic, 2 women a week, but it's been a very static figure. But 109 children every day. And so one of the things that actually, although I had thought initially when I was I had this kind of epiphany, somebody needed to do something. I thought, like, we needed to stop all these children being removed and kind of support these families. But what really came to me, I'm a Christian, it was like, what happens to these women afterwards? I was shaking their hands saying, best of luck, and knowing there was nothing. And it came to me, I thought, we need to provide a place of safety, of care, a non-judgmental place for these women to come and find a way forward, because their children will many children will come looking for their parents.
I should imagine that people are quite judgmental about women who lose their children, whose children are taken away from them. And I should imagine also that may be one of the reasons why there was a lack of resources for these women to turn to. Can you imagine these women, their children are taken away, they go back home to their homes, their houses, their flats. They look at their child's bedroom and it's completely empty. The child is not there. How on earth are they supposed to recover from that? Can they recover?
I mean, you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. The stigma of having your child taken away. I mean, many of the mothers, this is why often they live lives that are really separate from the rest of the world. They know, they might have a big belly, they're pregnant, and all of a sudden the neighbors, everybody sees them, there's no baby in their arms. And it's like, oh, this is a bad person. I don't want them around my children. They learn that And it's always the pain. So if they go to other groups, people will be talking about their kids at the weekend. Oh, you know, we took them to the park, and they'll lie. They'll say they don't have children, because immediately there's judgment. Immediately there's a stigma attached to them.